Okay, hi everyone. So this is the next episode in preparation for any tests that you have coming up, exams or assessments that you may be doing in the very near future. The main focus today is going to be comparisons. So these are a section of approaches. They're their own separate bullet point, really. So I was just going to give you a couple of examples of the style of question that could come up, and then it will kind of go through the plan of how I would answer it. And don't forget, I'm just making these questions up. So it's just, should we get in the right style? Okay. So that could be an example of a particular question in terms of wording. So we're talking about the first part of the question being outline the psychodynamic approach, and then compare and contrast this approach with one other. Okay, so this type of question is leaving it open, really, to you to choose which other approach you'd like to do. Now, obviously it's outline, so the first part of the question here is simply outlining the psychodynamic approach. Now, personally, I would suggest here to do one assumption, so this is going to be worth 6 marks, and 2 features. So in this situation you could do, I don't know, the assumption that all behaviour is driven by the unconscious. 2 features, you could do the psychosexual stages and the structure of the personality. Or you could do defense mechanisms and psychosexual stages. It's your choice. The point is, the first part of the question, just realised I've missed an N in there, but there we are. So psychodynamic. So then you move on to the bit that says compare and contrast this with one other approach. Now, if the question directly says, discuss differences with another approach, then obviously you have to do differences. If it says similarities, you do things that are similar. Compare, or compare and contrast. Compare on its own, it could be, would be similarities actually, hold on, I'm just going to simplify this, otherwise I'll run out of space. So that would be similarities and or differences. I'm trying to mix them up. Now, there is numerous ways you could do to kind of plan this question in terms of the differences. One method is using kind of Venn diagrams, and then in the middle here you're putting in maybe any similarities. So for example, I might pick something, so for this question I'd probably pick something like humanism, because humanism is quite different to a lot of the approaches, and then you could say they both have developed treatments or therapies to help. Differences, obviously you could put humanism there, psychodynamic, and you could put in, say, for example, deterministic, but this is free will. This emphasizes the conscious, that's the unconscious. So there's a variety of things. Now, what I would say is when you come to the AO3, essentially what you're going to be doing, so let's just take this free will determinism argument. You're essentially going to say, so you'd say the psychodynamic can be, or it mainly adopts the psychic determinism. But the key with this is you're going to stick to the Peel structure. Okay, so stick to the Peel structure, but the key is always include examples. So you've got to make this right. You can't just say this would be maybe considered deterministic because it says you're controlled by internal and external factors. This says behaviour is inevitable. That could be talking about any of them, right? And the key at this point is, yes, to develop your points, yes, to elaborate the points, but ultimately it's to give examples relevant to the approach. So you could mix it up a bit and say you've talked about psychosexual stages and defense mechanisms in the AO1. You could then down here say that they argue, so like maybe down here as an example or elaboration, you could say that having an overpowering id is argued to lead to maybe a selfish personality or something like that. So you're dropping in examples, making it relevant. Now, the key is, so at this point, is this comparison. Whereas, if you don't use comparative language, that's a no-go. You've got to do that. Okay, so you do your Peel on the psychodynamic, literally put whereas, and then you do another Peel down below. I'm running out of room here, but you do another Peel down below about free will. So why does the humanism and how does it differ? Now, once you've kind of gone P-E-E-L, whereas P-E-E-L, but then I would, if it was me, I would make a comment at the end. So after the, so like down here at the end, right, just after the L or around that time, and say maybe in society which approach is maybe deemed more superior or more respected, or what does this actually mean? So in this case, you could argue the humanistic approach therefore develops a more positive outlook because it accounts for free will, and especially with things like mental health, this may be a lot more a lot more positive in terms of recovery and treatment. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this bit. So that's one way they could ask you, and the others kind of take on a similar approach, really. So if you take something like this, it could simply say outline and evaluate it doesn't matter which one because it's just me making it up. Outline and evaluate the behaviourist approach to explaining human behaviour, and then it might say something like refer to at least one other approach in your answer. Okay, now this one technically you could adopt. So for the other question we just did, doing 2 evaluation points, really depth, maybe 3 if you've got time, probably a good idea. But this particular question, technically, you could just stick to a normal kind of 16 marker on that, and technically you could just reference another approach once. So you could do your normal 1 assumption, 2 features, and then you could go, it has practical applications because of therapy, it has research support, which is this, but then in one of your evaluation points you could say the behaviourist approach adopts the, deterministic argument as its environmental determinism, and then you could say unlike the humanistic approach, or whereas the humanistic approach does this, this and this, therefore, and then conclude. So this type of comparison is just like a normal 16 marker, but you just need to ensure that you're referring to at least, and wherever it's relevant really. But I would be definitely comparing in all of these in the AO3 more so. Okay, so the only other kind of question that it could come up something is if it directly just says compare the, and then it names. So compare the humanistic with psychodynamic, or compare the biological with behaviourist, or compare the, but it's a direct compare. Now technically, because it doesn't say outline, you don't have to do the whole, right, outline one assumption, two features of humanism, then outline one assumption, two features of behaviourist, or whatever you're doing. But this question probably is likely to cause more confusion, because you may be thinking, or do I just jump straight in, or what do I do? So this type of question, personally, sure, does you break down the question, maybe do a little plan like normal, compare, we know that's similarities and or differences, try and mix that up, as I said before, do maybe a similarity, a difference, etc., mix it up. So this particular question, there's a lot more emphasis in going straight into, this approach is nature, that one's nurture, this one's ideographic, this one's nomothetic, this one is deterministic, this one's free will, etc. Now, you are basically going to be gaining marks for the AO1 because of your knowledge of the approach, maybe some examples you drop in as well. But again, just doing that, adopting that structure like we said before, of Peel, whereas, Peel, and if it's appropriate, conclude down the bottom there which one's maybe more superior, more respected, more deemed, maybe the better approach. Okay, so that is the majority of comparison style questions that you may be faced with. There may be shorter ones, there may be ones that say how this approach and this approach compare for smaller marks, or overlap, or differ, or anything like this, but do be prepared for comparison style questions. Okay, so any questions you have, don't hesitate to ask. Don't forget to share this with friends, get them to subscribe, and like, so we can get this out to more students, to help everyone really. And if there's any direct questions, don't hesitate to ask.